Thank you. You're welcome. Oh, whoa. That's a lot of stuff. Oh, okay, that's
Yeah,
better.
so you get 3 of them there.
Oh, wait.
You got 3 packets there? Yeah, you do.
I do?
Yeah, 1, 2.
This one looks like a.
Oh, okay, I'll take that one back. There you go.
Did I grab it too?
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm sorry.
There we
There's
go.
much missing.
No problem. You're good to go.
You had, so you had 4. You know what? I'm gonna order a cheaper.
That's it. That's it. And I.
Well said.
Okay. Alrighty. Colorful in here with the balloons.
I know.
How long do they last?
Probably through bold, because bold is.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
How are you?
I am fine. How are you? Hey, there's some handouts out back there. Get one of each. There should be 3.
I'll grab those.
Good. Good.
I like the blazer.
Oh, thank you. Timer. It's just gone now. Yeah, you used to be able to pick something up. I've had this for like, gosh, I guess 3 years.
I like Steinmart more for some home stuff.
Well, I would always find that piece of clothing that would pull everything else together there, you know, I don't do well in stores like Ross or anything, I can't match anything up, and, you know, even Macy's is overwhelming to me. I always like Ward Taylor, something I, you know, went right through it. Hi, how are you? Good. There's some handouts here, back there for you, pick one of each.
One each.
One of each. Yeah, I think we're gonna have fun today. I'm really excited to present this class. Well, how's it going with you? What's going on?
Well, I have a buyer lead that I'm working with. He's got to get pre-qualified, and this lease isn't up until February, so, you know, we're not.
Yeah, well, that's great. And so actually, you know, what I've been doing with some of my buyers is so good. I want to make sure that's not me, Jamie. I don't think it is. Okay, I've been showing them that is the incentives, buyer incentives are huge right now, and I just closed the house with some new buyers that went under contract last September. I'll tell them they had to wait all that time. They walked into $75,000 worth of it because of the price increase. And so with all of the incentives, I mean, Highland's offering $20,000 to $27,000 in buyer incentives and closing costs. So, I mean,
And
if you're working with a buyer, you might want to consider a new build, because since they're waiting anyway, yeah, they might have to rent a place for, but at least you know what's going on, and it's so well worth it to walk in with that. Hi, everybody. Listen, there's some handouts back there. Take one of each. Hi, Sally.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Long time no see, girl.
I know. Well, I haven't been down your hallway lately. Which is a good thing since Bob. So, where's he living? You're back.
Probably like Grand Prairie or.
Yeah, there's all
I'll
the
have
lives
to
down
do,
there.
I'll have to do some searches up in
Yeah.
that area.
Yeah, well, we're gonna talk about that today, and I think I think it's gonna be very helpful for you and give you the time to really study the market where you're taking it to. It's my goal anyway. Yeah, got it. What's going on? Did you have a good vacation, Paul?
Oh, I did. We
Where'd you
just
go?
got back from Glacier National Park last night.
Oh, how nice, and thank you for coming, because I know you must be tired.
My wife was not happy. She had contractor there this morning, and it's like, nope, gotta go.
Gotta go, see you back at lunch. There you are.
I'll get you for that right now. There, where are you sitting?
Right back.
Do I have time to get a coffee real quick?
Absolutely, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I need it, I really need it.
Latest one myself.
Good morning. Didn't know that was you from the back. See there? That's it. I recognize from the front there. And that way I can.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? And it's gonna be a real open class, you know, one feedback, and get a great hand up and start talking. Hi, good morning. Hi. Grab one of each here. Sure. There you go. Sure, I have related some of it. Yeah. We'll wait just a few minutes and get started.
How long were you in the appraisal business?
Years. Yeah.
Did you do real estate along with it or is it?
No, I
two separate?
hated selling.
Okay, two separate.
I'll tell you this story once we get started, like a long road to get to selling again. Love it, you know, I absolutely love it. Why didn't I do this 30 years ago? Oh my
I
God.
keep asking myself, why didn't I do this?
I know,
10 years
I
ago or
know.
more.
I would be rich by now.
Me too.
For sure. Just,
I think it was explained this way,
uh,
and I was just trying to make sure.
we'll wait for those couple to get back in and then we'll get started. We're pretty close to our class in this. It's real interesting. And so it's about a 2-hour class, so to really go through everything effectively, but you're gonna walk away with some valuable.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I keep looking at the camera, I'm all confused. Oh, okay, I see how we're.
Yeah. Let me go and see if how if they need to come in when we start. Give it back.
How's your listening going in Grenada? It's good. It's good. Thank you. Jeannie, yeah, these are all open. Yeah, I think so. And there's handouts in the back.
Hey, there you are. Hi, good to see you. These are some handouts back there, one of each. Well, that's kind of good news about your house, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, what do you mean?
Well, they're looking, you know. Oh, yeah. Yeah, good, and they liked it.
I've gotten 2 offers.
You did? Oh, my gosh, hallelujah. That's awesome.
Doing all right. I am gonna be tied up this week. I'm not gonna be able to do that. So I'll have to find somebody who's solid. Right. Did you? Oh, okay.
Reimbursed by a computer on the,
Label?
well, it's actually on the card, but I mean, but it's a on card. But only it is.
Yeah.
Put that.
And so,
Yeah.
But I actually.
Yeah, Laura, that's leave it on.
I get it from Marion's. I shouldn't even know, the company sent,
Okay.
it's the same, and I said, I know, I'm just. I'm not gonna take it home.
He's getting coffee. How are you today? Well, it's Jack. Thank you.
Okay.
I always find it once we work and pull everything together, I mean, it's such a work for years. They were there.
Good.
No, and if you go out there, it's taking it out. That's kind of old school. So. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, everything kind of the middle here. You want it, put it inside like, your picture, so you can sit inside and then you go dig it when you want it. So, or it's not here in the book, it's good to open up anytime, you know. It's nice to meet. So everybody, I think we're gonna get started here. So we can get through everything. So everyone should have, I have 3 packets back there.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, very good. I said I'm kind of old school. I like to have pen and paper, and, you know, put it in a file somewhere you can always go back to. And I know the computers do that, so we get busy and then we don't go through our computer. If you're like me, you get where you put it. in the computer. I know it.
Or somebody accidentally.
Exactly, exactly. Well, so for those of you who don't know me, which I think I know pretty much everybody, but I'm April Cordell. And I actually came on board here June 1st of this year from another brokerage. So I've been selling for about the past 3 years, going close to 4 years. And decided that, so to tell you a little bit about me, I started in appraising way back in the 1970s. I'm really old. So no, you're not. Oh, yeah. So anyway, I was younger then, right? So I had gotten a real estate license. I was living in St. Louis, Missouri at the time, and decided to get a real estate license because I wanted to invest in properties and get rich, you know. And so, so I thought, why did I take this appraisal class? I didn't think much of selling. I was working for an agency there, and boy, these people, you know, they're dragging out at night and, you know, then they ever call you back. And I go like, I'm not happy with this. So let's find out if we can buy some properties. So I took this class and fell absolutely in love with appraisal. And the instructor, luck would have it, that he was hiring for an intern. So I got the job. And I want to tell you, we were baptized by fire in those days. I mean, it's nothing like it was now. We did everything by hand. We drew our floor plans. We went out, you know, to measure. We had no computers. We had a typist and a secretary. And if you didn't have a secretary, you did it yourself. You had to type on these forms. We were using the red book and seeing everything in the books, going down to the courthouse looking for sales. I mean, it was gruesome. So it, you know, really got it learned from the bottom up. So that was in St. Louis. So it's in 1975. And then we came to Texas in 1978. And so I got a license here and started appraising. I worked with different appraisers here, and eventually I got and started my own little business. So I had 3 people out of my garage. So yeah, it was the old garage band days. Anyway, so then I was hired by SMS TRW, and they were a big firm that did appraisals. And so I was made chief appraiser. It's over 28 people here in town. And later they transferred me to different states. So I was actually certified in 5 states at that time. I had an IFA designation and an SRA designation, independent fee appraiser, and society real estate appraisers. But then they made us get broker's licenses. So I got a broker's license. Then they brought in certifications. So I was certified in Texas, Kansas, Missouri, Ohio, and Georgia, because I traveled all around that. And I was overseeing different appraisal offices, and I would review their appraisers and sign off on them, because at that time they didn't have enough credibility to sign on their own, so they had to have a chief appraiser. So then we came back. We actually ended up staying in Georgia for a while. And I retired in 1996 from appraising, went into corporate sales. I went into food sales, and I was a manufacturer's rep for an oil company and for an egg company. And I figured if I could sell liquid oil and liquid eggs, I could certainly sell a house. And so when I moved here, I decided, okay, I'm getting back into real estate. So I re-upped my license. We got here in in 2016. And I got my license actually in 2019. I was doing some other things, trying to like move here back again. We came back to be with family. So that's kind of the short story of my life. But I love appraising. I'm not certified anymore in Texas, and I really don't want to be because I don't really want to appraise again. It's, you know, you're out there taping houses in all kinds of inclement weather and all of that. And I'm just to the point where I'd rather wear high heels and get dressed up. So anyway, so I love sales, absolutely love it. But let me tell you what today is about. And this is where it's going to be different. I'm not going to teach you how to do an appraisal. That's not the goal of this course. The goal of this course, or what I'm going to be talking to you about today, is how to read the appraisal, how to understand it through the eyes of the appraiser, which I want you to look at this as what they're looking at, because you know, you don't know, you get this thing and go, what the heck, where did these numbers come from? How did they get there? That's what we're going to talk about today, how to navigate that appraisal. And then by talking about the terms that we're doing today, we're going to find out what the front page of the appraisal report is about, as well as the grid page, and how did those jive and get together. So we basically have 3 handouts here. We're going to start with the appraisal terms. We're going to move on then to the URAR, which is it's actually the actual appraisal. And I want to tell you, this 1040 form is not much different than it was 50 years ago. They've done a good job with it. They've tweaked it a little bit, but basically it's the same form. And the appraisers are held to standards and practices. And we're going to talk a little bit about them. They're locked into an area where they have to perform within that area, just like we do in real estate. We have certain preambles and standards that we have to live by, and so do the appraisers. And we're going to talk a little about that and how you as agents can work within that realm with them. So we want to relate to the form after we talk about these. And then my final and my real goal here is, how can you, as a sales agent, be better at what you do in your CMA, how to approach the appraiser, whether you're representing the buyer or the seller. Okay, so we're going to talk about that and what you can do when you get an appraisal, when it is not, when you need to challenge it, when it doesn't come in, and how to maybe prepare for that prior to the appraisal even happening. So we have some, and that's what that third packet is a sample of that. And I'm going to, read you a letter as to what you can do and how you can work with the appraiser without telling them what the value is. Okay, so let's get started. Now, if they want an open class, start talking. If you have questions, stop me at that time, because I don't know where everybody's coming from. I assume that, you're all selling some real estate, but you haven't had all the experiences yet, maybe, and we all share that, and that's really helpful. So first of all, I do want to just mention a couple of things. When an appraisal is being done, and today we are talking about the residential appraisal. As you know, there's all kinds of different appraisals. There's a value and use appraisal. There's a land appraisal, income producing appraisal. There's sentimental value appraisal, inheritance appraisal. So there's all kinds of appraisals, and they're all held to a little bit of a different standard. Today, we're strictly talking about a 1 to an 8 family, what we consider residential appraisal. So I know you've all been to real estate school and you've all heard the terms of, depreciation, and we can concentrate on that a lot today because, see, actually, a house is physical. And so this is why we've got to be so concerned as the structure and how that is, relating to value. Now, just a couple of things I want to say about the appraiser is that basically they are held, you're looking at what is my scope? What is the purpose of this appraisal? So today it's going to be the residential. And then it's what's the highest and best use. And I just want to say something about land before we get started. We always look at the house, always thinking the house, but it's not the house, it's the land. The land is what brings value to the property. So land is an investment in perpetuity. That means it goes on forever. It goes all the way to the sky. It goes down to the center of the earth. It does not, it depreciates. They use that word and it's deceiving because it sounds like it decreases or increases in value. It does decrease in value over time or increase. But what they mean by depreciation is it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't matter if it gets washed away by a hurricane, that place of God's earth is still right there. So think of it this way, you know, we were born as a nation, everything was woods, the woods became farms, the farms became subdivisions, the subdivisions become, well, is that the best thing? Maybe the cities move toward it, maybe we should go more commercial. But that piece of land has still remained the same, even though it's changed. So what we are looking for is what brings the greatest value to the land itself. So the first thing the appraiser has to do, and actually you too, is when you walk up to a house saying, is this the highest and best use for this property? Should it be something else to be more valuable? So we all see the little dilapidated house in the city, and we look at it, we go like, could it be a residence or should it be something else? So that's kind of what you want to look at. And the land value will tell you that as you begin to do your research, you'll be able to see the change. And this is where we're going to relate all of this activity that we're going to be talking about on this physical and on the depreciation factor is how it relates and how the appraiser gathers all that data. All right. So you've all been in real estate school. We all know that there's 3 types of depreciation: physical, functional, and economic. So we're going to start with physical right now. And physical is basically a loss in value due to normal wear and tear. Now, again, we're only talking about the house. We're not talking about outside the house or what's going on out in the streets. We're just talking about the house. It can be curable and it can be incurable. So if it's curable, that means that the cost to fix it does not exceed its market value. So it makes it worthwhile to fix it. If it's incurable, then we look at it and say, well, the cost to cure is too much, and therefore it's going to exceed market value for the neighborhood. So what should we do? What will happen there is probably the bank won't make a loan. Now, does that mean you can't buy the house? Sure, you can buy the house. You might be buying it because it was your grandma's house, and or you have sentimental value, or you like this area, or you love it a lot. There's all kinds of reasons, but it might not be economically feasible. So let me give you a little example of that. I had an investor that called me, and he was it was his first time investment, and he wanted to buy a house that he could fix up himself and sell. So we were down over in favorite place, Oak Cliff. And so there was a house for sale down there for $80,000. Now, what was happening down there in this neighborhood is these little 1950 and 1960 homes. They were somewhat in disrepair because the neighborhood had declined. So what investors were doing is going in, just tearing everything out. I mean, even to the floor where you just went down to the joists, everything to the joists, and then rebuilding the interior of that house. Well, even homes that hadn't had that done were listed between maybe 180, 2.25, somewhere in that range. So after looking at the neighborhood, well, this house was $80,000, and we went to look at it, and I opened the door and I said, "I'm not going in there. Feel free." I went in. So it had been in probate for a couple of years. Everybody that owned the house died. So it was just sitting there, except the vagrants who came in and decided to live there. They literally tore out the floor. They tore out the ceiling. The insulation was all over the floor. It was a holy mess. And, but my guy liked it. And so we came in at 91.5 and we got the deal. So we went over the $80,000, but I had seen others that were out there that were kind of torn apart. They were around 88. And I thought, well, if we really, really want this house, we're going to have to be a little aggressive. This was about a year and a half, maybe a little more ago. So it was really before the big rush. So I think he's in good shape now. But anyway, so he went in, he did it. He figured he's going to put $60,000, $70,000 into this house, which he did. But here was the good thing about the house. It was a brick home. It was really good on the outside, had a great lot, very deep, fenced, treed. And it really sat in a nice place in the neighborhood. So I felt that, you know, it was probably a safe bet for him to do this. So by doing that and by putting, let's say, 70,000 into it, which was probably about what he has done, and he got it for 90. So here he is at 160. That neighborhood's going for the high 2s and maybe just under 3. So he is going to make $130,000 by working on it for the past year, basically. And he did it himself. He used to take that money and do the next one. And that's what people used to do back in the day before the IRS and the government got involved with it. I was working with a lot of investors in St. Louis. And I would go look at the properties, they would buy them, they bundled them together, they'd have 10 rent homes, 30 rent homes, and they were becoming millionaires. And you know what? You know who hated it? Our government hated it. They said, wait a minute, you guys are getting richer than we want you to be. So they said, we're going to take away this, and you can only have 2. And it's never changed. And so after 2, you're paying heavy taxes. So they really cut out that tax incentive for really wanting to buy a lot of real estate as an individual, you know, because individuals were getting rich off of this, and it was a neat thing to do. So things changed. That was about the late 80s, early 90s that they did that. So it kind of screwed the whole investment market. Now I see it coming back. And it's coming back because really of COVID when you look at it. So I'm getting a little off track with that, and we're going to get a little bit more into that. So I want to talk about the physical depreciation. So give me an idea of it comes both, it's curable and incurable, and I've kind of explained that, but it's also short-term and long-term. Anybody give me some ideas of some short-term depreciation that you would figure? You go into a house and you go, okay, this has to replace in a short period of time.
Air conditioning,
Well,
the HVAC system.
it could be, that could, you know, we'd hope it would last 10 years, but you know, that's a little bit on the long side. Carpet, definitely,
Fence.
definitely the fence. That's gonna fall down, but that might even fall in a little longer period, okay? I'm kind of looking at things 5 to 10 years that would probably fall apart. In my mind's eye, I see that as a short-term, you know, depreciation. So in order to keep a house up to grade, so here's how the appraiser looks at it. The standard's been set that if a house is built today, it should last about 60 years, and then it stops adding value to the land. So we've talked about that, because if you did nothing to it, it would decline and just stop adding value to the land. So what do? We buy a house, and 15 years down the road, we know we have to put in a new kitchen because they change the kitchens every 15 years, you know, it's not going to be saleable. I'm kidding about that, but quite honestly, they pressure us to really update at that. So you've got new carpet going in, you've got, you know, maintenance on your HVAC. You've got things that you've done to that house. Let's say a house is 15 years old. So it was built, we gave it a life of 60 years. The house is 15 years old, but because of the upkeep that they did, let's say it looks 8 years old. So instead of that house being 15 against the 60 and now having a remaining economic life, and I'm going to explain all this in a minute, remaining economic life of 45 years, it now has 52 years added on to that because it looks only 8 years old. This is what the appraiser is looking at when you turn the page and get into the grid part and you see the Q6 or the C6 down there, meaning condition and quality. So this is how the ratio that they use based on that. Now, it is subjective. And again, it's one man's opinion based on fact, based on data. So it's basically a subjective opinion, but in that respect, but it is objective in the fact that it's based on those facts. So that 60-year-old house, now we've added to the longevity of it. Let's take another example. My daughter lives down on Swiss Avenue. Her house is 110 years old. So it has gone through many changes, obviously. I'm pretty sure they didn't have indoor plumbing at that time. So they do now. And, you know, obviously the wiring has been done. The plumbing has been worked on and done, if not totally refurbished. The inside has had maintenance, so because it's a very beautiful house. There's no cracks, there's no foundation problems, you know. So basically what's happened to that 110-year-old house is now you look at it, it probably has a remaining economic life easily of maybe 35, maybe 55 years, just because it's been there for so long. Every house on Swiss Avenue is over 100 years old. And it's still looking good and it's still cranking out and it's still between now, it's selling for $1 to $3 million in there, depending on the size of the home. And because these were the first mansions in Dallas. So they were beautiful. My daughter loved it from the little girl because they had dance floors on the third floor, you know, and basically she was going to live there one day and darn if she didn't, you know. So I wouldn't, but anyway, she likes it. But that's just me. I like new stuff. Too old for all that stuff. But anyway, so what you're looking at here is that you're able to extend the remaining economic life. So these are the three factors, and I have it down there, and you might just make a note. So you have the actual age was 15 years of this example, right? But the effective age, EFF, effective age, was 8 years, which gives a remaining economic life of 52 years, instead of if we just strictly went on actual age.
Can you say that again? Can you say that again?
Yes,
Actual.
actual age is how old the house really is. It, in this case, was 15 years old. The effective age, we decided was, and the appraiser would probably use 5 to 8 years. We don't get real specific about that, but we know that it's better. It could be half as old as it looks, okay? So, or as it really is. So we said that was 8 years. So based on the 60-year economic life, then we basically have 52 years left of remaining economic life. These are important because when we get to the grid page in the form, we've got to determine how old this house really looks in comparison to our comparables. So as an agent, how can this be helpful? I mean, you're going to walk into that house and it's not just about the color in the salad. We've got to look a little deeper than that. We've got to look at those long range. If the house is extremely old, we need to know the long-term physical depreciation is the roof, it's the wiring, it's the plumbing, it's the foundation, it's the interior, you know, the studs. What's happening to all of that house? And we need to look at that because it does depreciate. So even though these homes on Swiss may be 110 years old, they may only depreciate 50% of their value. So we want to stay within the guidelines, and I think appraisers do, of the loan amount. You know, they're protected. The reason we're doing this is because there's a loan on the property. That's why we're looking at value. Otherwise, we don't care. People have money, we'll sell them anything they want, right? As long as they've got cash. So that's not the same story. So we have to look at it that way. So you're going in and you're bringing your buyer in, or better yet, you're listing the house, which, you know, we had to look at some terms on that and say, okay, where is the value in this house and where does it stand up to the neighborhood? That's a little bit different. We're going to move on down. Right now, we're just looking at the depreciation and looking deep into it. So again, like I said, it's the actual age versus the effective age, which equals the remaining economic life age. And you can count that as an REL, is what you'll basically see, remaining economic life. It is curable and incurable. Most of the time, it will be curable in most cases. That was a close one, the one that I gave you the example of. But in most cases, you can cure it, especially if people have lived there for a long time. And so, you know, to do the work, it generally falls within the market range. I know in my neighborhood, I lived in it, the house was built in 1989, and the homes in that neighborhood are 2,400, and the newest ones were probably 2013, 14, somewhere in that range. So we've got this spread in there. The ones that were built in 89 are now in the process of being totally refurbished on the inside, and some of them totally remodeled, so that they have the market appeal. But heck, they've been living there for 30 years. So guess what? Their loan's paid off. So it's definitely curable to go to the walls in there and redo the house. So that beat up physical pretty much. Anybody have any questions on that one? Anybody seen anything in your wanderings where you walked into a house and go, what do I do with the condition? Yeah, okay. So you really got to analyze that and look at it through the appraiser's eyes. Okay, is it valuable enough to do this? You know, you don't want to tell somebody that they have to redo all the wet areas in their house when in fact it's going to exceed market value. This is where the key point is. Okay, so we're going to move on to functional obsolescence, which is my favorite. And functional obsolescence is a loss in value due to the usability of the home itself. How functional is it? So it's a loss in value for like a poor floor plan, an over improvement, an under improvement. So we want to look at those things. Okay, so give me some examples of what you might think, or have you seen anything in your wanderings in your home if it's functionally obsolete? Oh, anything?
Just a formal living room.
It's getting to be kind of not so much anymore. Yeah, people don't want it. They're turning it into either an office or just blowing the wall out, and making a big living area. That's a good one. Yeah. How about the number of bedrooms per baths per ratio? I had a situation where there was a condo down in Oak Lawn, and there was tons of condos down there. I had a 1-1. I was representing the buyer. And so it was priced at a certain amount, and we came under contract with it, and the appraisal was just awful. He came in, he basically, on the grid side, instead of using a specific amount across the square footage adjustment, he used a different amount for each comp. And I go, hey, if you're gonna use $30, use $30 all the way across. Don't put 27 here, 38 there. So that was goofy. Then he used all 2 2s against my 1-1. Now, I think we all know that the person that's looking for a 1-1 is not the same person that needs a 2-2, or vice versa, especially. So we know that. So you don't use the 2 2s, even if you have to go outside the time and the location range, at least try and find the same buyer. If that buyer wants a 1-1, where do they have to go to get it? And how much is it going to cost them? And Oak Lawn's a pretty big area, and it's got a whole lot of condos. So there was a lot to look at. He didn't want to, we challenged this. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to admit that he screwed up the square footage. So we were sitting there with 6,000 under. And so, and I had the buyer that, you know, from hell. So she was not going to move anything. This was, we've been working weeks and weeks, both the seller agent and myself. She was not going to pay another penny. So we both kicked in some of no commissions, and so did the lender, and we got her closed. Closing, I just gave her a high five. Just go away, never come back. I don't, you know, I'll refer to you, Sally. You can deal with her. So you get those buyers, but this was a poor appraisal, and he would not move on it. And so I learned something there. And the reason I bring this up is because I had just started selling real estate again. It was like the first 2 months I got back into it, and I actually relied on the seller's agent to provide the comps. Okay, and she said, I've got them. And she did, but they didn't fly. Okay. And by the time I started looking, it was too late. The appraisal was already ordered and done. So we're going to talk about this at the end, how we can avoid that problem. But I learned something from that. So I think that's important. But functional obsolescence, oh, love to talk about these things. Okay, and I really do like it. Walked into a house up here in, I was representing some buyers. They went to look at a house up in Frisco. It was off of Rogers Road. And in there, all the houses were going for anywhere from 7 to million, close, maybe a little higher. And walked into this house, and so it was on a beautiful piece of land. It was pretty ugly though. As you pulled up to the house, it was a U-shaped brick house, all the same color, 1 story. And then it had this path, it had sort of a southwestern flair to it. It had this path, I swear it was, what do you call those things, the board things that you put pallets. I think it was built pallets and covered it with astroturf as you walk in the house. But okay, so that wasn't so cool. But the house was a good quality house. Walked into the house and it was like kind of so Dean Martin, you know, it was 50s. Walked in, it had this half brick wall right here, sunken living, you know, family room. Over here, the raised living room. We had a dining area here, kitchen here.
Back there.
I'm sure, yes, exactly. And then down the hall was the master. Now, everything really needed to be upgraded, you know, it was dated, of course, but it could be cool. It had a beautiful fireplace and across the back, all windows where you just looked out. I mean, it had possibilities, except when you walked in the kitchen, you went here and there was a hallway and here was a whole nother kitchen right here. So we had like the refrigerator, the stove, and then a wall and, you know, a doorway and then a refrigerator and a stove. Go like, what the heck? What's going on? And then down there was a hallway, there was a bath, and there was a utility room, and there was a doorway out the back. That was the only way out of the back of the house, was go down this hall and go out the side door. When in fact, the dining area was here, it would have been really good to put in sliding glass doors. You could just get right out to the back, but they didn't do that. Then there were 2 bedrooms down there and a bath. So I got to thinking about it, and I said, I think what happened is that they either had family or they rented that space out. There was probably a wall there at some point. And they did their cooking, and I don't know how they got out of the house because there was no way. You either had to go through that door or out the front door and walk all the way around the house, which was kind of silly. So it didn't make any sense. To me, that was functional and utility, obviously. And so they had opened it up for the showing though. So, I mean, it wasn't there, but well, let's face it, you're gonna have to have a kitchen out. I mean, it only needs 1 kitchen, or otherwise just really make it a nice big cook's kitchen and, you know, figure out what to do with that. But so that needed something. The girls decided not to buy it. They felt like they would have to put $200,000 into it. They wanted it for $500,000. It wasn't going to happen. So we walked away from it. But that was one thing. As far as functional utility goes, I really think if you're in a home that here's where you're really going to see it in the market is if you've got a neighborhood of 3 2s and you got a house sitting there with a 2-2 or 2-1. So in that case, it's doesn't meet the standards. Now, remember when we're talking about this, we're always talking about our subject's neighborhood. But sometimes, and we'll talk about this when we get into the end of the class, sometimes you have to go outside of that neighborhood to make it work, and it works. So we'll talk. Okay. So basically hey, Deidre, maybe mute, yeah. Diary. Okay. Maybe it isn't her, maybe it's us. There, okay, thank you. So, okay, we're living.
You were saying it's not really big.
Yeah, and so here's another one. I have an investor who moved here from Washington State, and he said, April, I need 3 houses. I need one for my family, I need one for my parents and one for my sister. I go, oh, great, let's go looking. And so we did, but it ended up, God bless them. They had 6 kids. She was like out here with number 6 and had it while we were looking, basically, but they were living in Airbnb, and it was like $5,000 a month, and they had to get out of there, and they'd been here for like 2 months. And so finally he settled on a house in Allen. It was in the mid-5s, and it was a 2-story, and it had 4 bedrooms. It was pretty big. It had a pool, and they wanted a pool. So he went in. The reason he was coming here, he had the money, but he wanted to start his own rehab business and flipping business. And so he needed to save that for the homes that he was going to buy and refurbish. So he came in, he did a real quick job on his house, moved his family in. So that was was that maybe 6 months ago. So anyway, he calls me the other day and he said, April, what do you think about this? He said, I think we want to put a 3rd story on the house at 1,000 square feet. What do you think? And I go, well, I said, Mary said, that's going to be a big over improvement for the neighborhood. No one else has that much square footage. You've already got close to 3. You're talking, he goes, 5,000 square feet. I go, it's just too big for the neighborhood to really get your money back on that. And he was doing it because he decided to move the whole family into the house itself. The one house. And so that's why he needed the 3rd floor for everybody. Oh, and I tried to talk him out of it, and he says, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. The houses about a mile away are selling for 1 to 2 million, and it's got this 5,000 square feet. I go, yeah, but that's not your neighborhood, you know? So I tried to tell him, but I said, my opinion is it's an over improvement. That's all you can say, and just tell them they can do what they want. So he's got it started. I need to go drive by there and figure out what this looks like.
I toured some David Weekly homes off Parker Road, and they have exactly what you just described. 3rd story options, 5 and 6 bedroom options. He could sell what he's got now.
Well, that's what I suggested, you know, why don't you go to the country, build 3 houses there, and you guys can all live a little separately. Yeah, I don't like land. I don't want land. I just, you know, want to be able to have this. So, you know, I couldn't talk about it, but when we were in Atlanta, my last house there, we sold the house we've been living in for 15 years, and I knew that it had pretty much topped out at that time. Took the equity, built a new house, same thing. The houses were being built 3 stories where 2 and 3 families are living in these. And they were brand new. I mean, and it was just to me, here's what happens. We'll talk about it when we get down to economic, but you got a lot of cars with that many people. Number one, where do you park in a 2-car garage? You see, you park in the street, you park it every which way. So, I mean, we have issues there with that. I don't like that concept. I didn't realize they were starting to do that here. And I'm not surprised. We don't have enough space for people to live separately anymore. And it's too expensive. You know, we've knocked the first time home buyer out of the market. So we kind of know that. So that was definitely, at this point, I wouldn't say that David Weekly would be functionally obsolete because he's building it in there and there will be other people in there to support this value. The problem with my investor is that there's no one's going to build in this neighborhood a 3-story house for 5,000 square feet. So he becomes an over improvement, which diminishes the value of the money that he's placing into that house. He won't get it back.
April, how do you define neighborhood?
Okay, now a neighborhood, and we're going to talk about this, especially when we get to the next one, economic, okay, obsolescence. But the neighborhood is the parameters of people building this, living. It kind of has to do with median income of that neighborhood. It has to do with what they're willing to, what the quality and construction of the house is, the age of the house. So when I look for, first of all, I look for subdivision, okay? I go by what subdivision is it in? And then I'll go ahead and say, okay, how large is it? How old is it? And I look at those parameters, I kind of go that way and build out that way. If I can find comps that support my value within those 3 things, I'm going to take those comps. I'm not going to go any further. But we will talk about this at the end of the class and show you how you can actually go just about anywhere depending on the type of house that you're talking about. And time is not always of the essence here when you're looking for a particular property. And I'll talk about that well, actually, I can talk about it now because it was definitely functional obsolescence. So I had a listing of a barn dominium. It was the barn dominium itself was 4.5 acres. It was 5,000 square feet. It had a home that had been refurbished. It was 1,260 square feet, and attached to the barn dominium was a 2,500 square foot warehouse. Okay, the problem was the functional obsolescence came in that the first floor of the 5,000 square feet, 2,500 square feet was the living area. It had 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, living, kitchen, storage. Okay. The upstairs was an artist studio. Now it was all finished, but you had no division between the rooms. You could have put 3 bedrooms and a family room up there. And it was gorgeous out there, just gorgeous. You felt like you were a little piece of heaven. But the problem was you couldn't get upstairs unless you went out into the warehouse and climbed up the steps or used the lift to get up in there. So, and there was a half bath up there. So here it was, I had to put it in MLS and I go like, okay, this house has, because I had 1 bedroom and a bath and a half over here. I had a bath and a half here, and out in the warehouse, there was a bedroom with a full bath. So I said, this house has, 6,200 square feet. It has 3 full and 2 half baths. And, and then I had to do a big explanation in there because it doesn't give you the option to say, I couldn't ignore this, but this is important because people ask about square footage, and we might as well address this at this point. When you're looking at square footage, you have to look at the original foundation. If somebody builds an addition on the side, that has to be considered separate because it wasn't part of the original foundation. A different foundation was poured, it was built at a different time, and so we handle it differently. The same thing, you don't have that here, but basement improvement, different. You can't include it in the overall square footage. The guest house out by the pool, it has to be considered separate. So when I finally was able to explain the situation, we had a house here, we had a condominium here, we had a warehouse here, and we had acreage here. Now, in order for me to even get comparables, I found barndominiums, but we had so much stuff going on there. They didn't really hit it for functional obsolescence, which I was glad that they did. Because, going back to that condominium, he not only hit me for size and room count and bath count, and then he threw in some functional obsolescence on top of it. So when you start adding all of that stuff up, where in my opinion, functional obsolescence should include some of that square footage or whatever you're dealing with, and then just be explained in the comments, but that's neither here nor there. So we did get the house appraised, we did get the house sold. And basically, everything had to be kind of considered separately when you're doing this, because, obviously that 6,000 square feet wasn't, or the 5,000 in the house, it really wasn't the whole thing. I mean, because the upstairs wasn't really livable, except if you were going to use it for a business.
Or an artist studio.
Or an artist studio, right, exactly, and had dark room and everything, it was great. I really did try and market it down here in, Bishop's Arts, but nobody would buy it. Anyway, I didn't want to go out that far. But so we get a lot of that. I'm pretty sure that all of you are aware of, what is going on, especially in the East Dallas area. Those homes over there, and I'm talking about a little bit northwest highway between Central and Jupiter Road. And I'm telling you, they're all being blown in south of LBJ, even a little bit north of LBJ. They're all being blown out to the walls and redone. I had a house in there that I listed for, I want to say it was 265 or something. This was back in 2019. And it was a hard sell because everything in there that was probably pretty much the top of the market. Right now that house is sell easily for $450. That's how much it actually, I sold another one on the next street and she got in for $255. The house next door closed smaller than that for $450. And, and her house is nice. It had been updated. That's how much appreciation is happening northwest highway because it's the only place left. You can't buy anything west of Central for less than $1 million anymore, especially if you're in the Highland Park, University Park, M streets.
I got a question. I do a lot of stuff in old North Dallas.
Yeah.
Really used to be North Dallas with 2,000 square foot houses built in, let's say 1960, where they've enclosed the back patio.
Yeah.
For about 300 extra square feet. It's air conditioned. It's done well.
Yeah.
But it's not on the foundation.
Perfect example of it needs to be handled. It would be right under, when you're looking at the grid, when we get to the grid part, you're going to see rooms and then you're going to see square footage. And there's a little space right under that where it says basement and additional rooms. You're going to put that down in there, that 300 square feet. It's going to be figured at a different dollar amount. Now, it may be close to the original, depending on its finish out. But they're going to handle that as a separate square footage figure. Okay, they should.
So we can still market it.
You can,
Market it for the total and then just explain it.
you can say, I would just be clear in my, and a room addition was added on for an extra additional 300 square feet, which has been included in the square footage. Now, you want to be careful because you want to make, the city, what does the city have? I always go by what the city has and then explain afterwards, especially in my MLS as well as if I were doing an appraisal.
Yeah, I'm having all day by an appraiser.
And then you're fine. You can always rely on the appraiser. And, not all appraisers are alike and they may not, I'm just telling you, I'm just telling you what the standard is, okay? If they go against that standard and it hurts you, you can challenge it. If it helps you, I leave it alone. You know, why create a problem
Because
if there is?
I do end up dealing with a lot of interesting comments from realtors who show it.
Yeah, oh, okay,
When
okay.
they, don't like the way it was described, and so I'm trying to figure out
Ah,
how to properly describe it. So,
Right. okay.
Your explanation there helps.
Oh, good, good. Well, always, and guys, call me, I'm here in the company and it's just, Paul he came over and we did an analysis on what he was doing. So I really think, call me, I'm here for that, okay?
So are you saying, no, do I understand? You're saying that the appraiser will consider a room or something
An
that was
addition.
added on after the original foundation,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
but
At a different dollar amount for adjusting. Because think of it this way, guys, when those houses were built, they were all built the same, let's say 1,200 square feet. But this 300 as, brings it up to 1,500. So it starts to become somewhat larger
Do
than
you
what's
need
in
to
the.
say that in your property description or to the appraiser?
I would just build one liner, say, beautiful family room addition has been added on to the rear of the house. If it's 300 square feet, I would stay away from the square feet. People will sue you over the dumbest stuff. And so just based on the appraiser's evaluation, it's 300 square feet. Based on the county, it's 300. The county probably doesn't have it. So why bring it up? So I know you have to describe it. I would just say a beautiful family room addition has been added to the rear of the property. Yeah,
More question. I currently have it listed.
okay,
The county did have it. They did,
good.
but I still was able to pick up another 100 square feet.
Yeah,
So that.
based on the appraiser, you can use that.
And we documented that.
Yeah.
But let's say the house is worth $250 per square foot, the original
Okay.
square footage. What kind of hit does the extra 300 that's not on the foundation take?
Well, basically, you reconstruct it and depreciate it, just like you would the house if it were new and depreciate it. And then you come up with a figure that you think that what's the contributory value of the house? Now, what appraisers do is called paired sales analysis, PAIRED, paired sales. So what they would do is I would go out and I would look at homes that had additions and compare it to a sale of a similar home that did not have the addition and see what the price difference was. Basically, you'll probably see it in the square footage, okay? Square footage dollar amount. So in that respect, you can kind of get an idea of, it's kind of like a pool. Oh, this house sold for this much more, or it didn't have any contributory value based on paired sales analysis. Now, it's a cumbersome process for the appraiser because you can't just do one. And when you work in appraising, you're working in an area, and that's why it's important that our appraisers come from here and don't come from Sherman and do something down in Bishop Arts, because it's a whole different culture and it's a whole different desirability down there. So you have to understand where you're appraising from. So when they look at that, they have already done that market analysis and saying, in this neighborhood, half-baths bring ABC. In this neighborhood, addition and, per square foot in addition brings this much dollar amount. So these are things that they know. There's no magic list. I hate to tell you. There's no list that, you have the appraiser's list and bathrooms and bedrooms. It's different for the neighborhood because every neighborhood has a different income level to be compared to itself, you see? So I can tell you that a half bath in Highland Park is going to be a heck of a lot more than a half bathroom down in Oak Cliff. You see, so I mean, you really just have to know the neighborhood as to what the contributory value is to what we're talking about. But if you stay in your neighborhood, you're going to be okay because you'll see that represented in the difference between homes that have 2 bathrooms versus 2.5 bathrooms. And so you want to take a look at that when you're pulling your comps. Is there any difference in price? Maybe not.
Just a lesson learned that I found out last week, and it was my first person that I represented, both on the buy and sell. But on the buy, it was multiple offers during the height of the period. And I never went back and looked at the history of the MLS and to see that the square footage made a significant jump in a previous sale. And what they did is took a 3-car and made it a 2-car and added 110 square feet. And all they did is moved an air conditioning outlet from the laundry room into a workbench area.
Yeah.
So it wasn't separated. So now the
So they actually, did they bring the laundry room into the interior of the home?
no, the laundry room was already there. All they
Okay.
did is move the AC into the garage, took it out of the laundry room.
Oh,
And that's how they were claiming, or at least that's what we suspect was going on. So we're looking into it, but
Yeah.
it's just a lesson learned for the new folks. Go back and look at the history of the MLS.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. In fact, I usually do if I know that, this house is, when I go to the taxes, and I'll use realist if I can, or remit, remit. Thank you. I use realist and then remit, but I go into it and I look at the history of when it was first built and who, what the chain of deed was. In doing that, guys, it is listed, that old MLS number's in there. And so if it's been 8 years ago, 10 years ago, they keep it for 10 years, but I think it's even in there longer. I put that in and I can see exactly what that house looked like the last time it was listed. So I always pull that, put it in the file as well. Do that. That's a great idea. I'm glad you brought that up because I wouldn't have thought of it. But it is good to absolutely look at the history of the house. A lot of ways that I find, okay, I'll see a house that I don't know how to get in touch with anybody. I do use forewarn. So if you don't have forewarn, talk to me, you want it. And you might be able to, I put in the person's phone number or an address and from the deed, I can find their name, I can put that in, I can find their phone number through forewarn. So that's one thing as agents you can do. The other thing is you're looking at this and you find out, I'm looking right now for a client that wants to move here in a year and she wants the name of builders so that she can contact them and look at their floor plans. I go, well, good luck. And because it's not going to be the same, number one, in a year, and the price certainly isn't going to be the same. And I don't want to give her the builder's name and then have her circumvent me. So what I did is I sent her some MLS, that do you like this house? Do you like this house? It doesn't have a builder, it basically, it doesn't have the agent. I'm the agent on it because it goes, I use HomeSnap. So, or I guess it's Netris, and so it goes through that way. So what I'm doing is if she likes any of those, then I'm going to call the builder and I'm going to get a buyer's rep from him, or at least an agreement that I am the agent and register her as the agent and get a buyer's rep from her on that. If she's going to be talking to the builder, I want to be involved with it. But the way I'm finding that is I have the agent's name, she won't call me back. So I just go to the deeds and look at those. And there's the builder's name and number. I go to forewarn and pick out his number and I give him a call. So it kind of all works together. If you haven't been doing that, it's a good investigative process. Okay. So that's helpful. Yeah, forward. So getting back to functional, I want to mention one more thing about functional, and then we go ahead and move on. I was doing a house years ago when I was here, and the bank called me and said, April, we need to do an appraisal. We don't know if this house won't sell. We know we have it listed at market value. But there was a suicide in the house, and we need to know what to list it at. So we basically at that time, because it was in the 80s. We could say that there was a suicide in the house. Now, I think it really has to be like a murder, suicide, or some major crime for you to be able to disclose that's flashing. That's exactly. If there was one over here in Castle Linda last year, it was a murder, suicide, really sad. That's sad. But it did sell finally. But anyhow, getting back to this house, I had to go in there and decide, okay, what am I going to base this on? I know that there's some price that this house will be bought at. What is that price and how do I get there? Well, one thing I would do is just try and investigate, were there any other suicides in the world that you can look at and see, what happens. Yeah, I'm looking for people who committed suicide in their houses. Oh, they're all dead now. So anyway, so anyhow, at the time, and everybody in here probably remembers that some of these younger people do not, because it was in the 80s when AIDS hit and everybody was scared to death. You didn't know if you were going to get it from touching a table or sitting in a chair, breathing next to somebody. Everybody was scared to death. You think COVID was bad? That was awful because that was a death knell. for sure. And so at the time, Rock Hudson got it, of course, and he passed. Remember, when he lived in like an $8 million home and it went up for sale. And finally, and if my numbers are correct, I could be wrong, but it was significant. It sold for finally about 5 million. Finally, somebody didn't care that he had AIDS. You see what I'm saying? It didn't matter anymore. So I had to find that. And I'll be honest with you, I can't even remember what I appraised that house at, but it didn't sell. And we had discounted. I want to say maybe I discounted at 30%, something like that, you know, to kind of finally get a value that was interesting enough. Hey, what about the Amityville house? You know, right now it's on its third owner and they're doing fine. But there was a time when you couldn't touch a thing, you know, with a stick, because people were scared to death that, you know, flies and ghosts were going to come out at you.
A
So,
lot of cultures, well,
huh?
a lot of cultures.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, oh, they don't want it.
Flat out.
Well, this was the best. Okay, so I'm showing this house out in, you know, near HEB. And I don't usually go out there, but it was a lead and I said, okay, I'll take it. So the guy calls me and he said, you know, his business partner, he was gonna come out and we'd buy this house as an investment. So I go out there, I never met these people, I open the house up, I'm standing outside. They get out of that truck, this guy looks like he's MS-13. I mean, nothing was not pierced and tattooed and we're like, holy crap, what are they doing? So anyway, but the other guy looked fairly decent, you know, so I mean, he was normal looking. So we walked in the house, I go ahead in. I stood near the door. He walks in the house. Well, he goes, the normal looking guy goes, something bad happened in this house. And I said, excuse me? And he said, something really bad happened in this house. And I said, what? He goes, somebody died here. Well, I knew, the agent told me that the gentleman that she was selling it because her husband had passed and he was ill for a long time. So I don't know if he just committed suicide or blew his head off or whatever. I have no idea. There was no, obviously, I knew nothing about that. I said, well, interesting, you said that. I said, the agent did disclose to me that the lady was selling it, knew her husband had died and she was getting something smaller. And, you know, so he said, no, it was bad. He said, I'm not buying this house. And I said, well, how do you know this? Because I know these things. And I go, oh, he says, I can read people. And I said, well, am I okay? He goes, you're okay. Get me out of this, you know? But the funny thing is that they didn't buy that house. But about a year later, I get this call and it's, I name was familiar. And it was the guy from MS-13. And he's the nicest guy in the whole world.
The tattoo guy.
The tattoo guy with the piercings, yeah, the nicest guy. He didn't have enough money to buy. His landlady said, I'll sell you the condo for this amount. He goes, should I buy it? And I go, yes, you buy that condo from her, you build your equity over here, and then you call me and we'll buy you the house you really want. You know, I mean, sometimes you just have to do that. And it was fine, but he turned out to be the nicest. Yeah, it's just, do not look at the outside cover. I'm just telling you, the books can still be good. And so
Was the non-tattooed guy and the tattoo guy, how were they?
they were business partners. I wasn't sure because he said my partner, so I really wasn't sure. You know, I don't ask. You know, just go, that's nice, you know. So anyway, to each his own at this point.
And so the non-tattooed guy, he just had
He had this premonition. He walked in,
That's all it was.
I mean, he walks into that, he's just like this, and he goes, something bad happened here. And I'm over here, I go, excuse me, I didn't hear, I thought I heard it right. Something really bad happened here. Somebody died in here. I went like, he was right on. So, you know, what can I say?
Interesting.
How
Yeah,
far
isn't that
had he
weird?
made it into the house?
Huh?
How far had he made it?
Oh, he was in the kitchen. So you walked in and then the kitchen was over here and he did walk through the house. He goes, yeah. Yeah, he went to the back and something really bad happened here. So I, you know, it was really creepy. That's when I said, well, am I okay? To make sure they had an easy out. I was like, I was gonna run for sure. So the most interesting thing's gonna happen. It really can. So we're getting a little bit off, but these stories are fun because they tell you the actual circumstances that you have to deal with and what the appraiser, I mean, we're people, we're looking at this, appraisers are people. They're seeing the same thing and, you know, they have to consider everything and still be objective. You know, this is not a science. There's not an exact way. There's that list with that exact number on it. They have to really analyze the data. So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I do want to get to the grid as well. But So if we can move on from functional, again, a loss in value from factors within the house itself. And that can be the porch outside, you know, or a funky roof. How about that roof over in Highlands Park? Did you see the one with the swooping roof that looks like Disneyland? That looks like elves live there? Oh, yeah, it's right at the corner of Preston and whatever, Trammell's house is across the street. And it's big time, but it looks like something that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs would live in. And it's just got this sloping roof, but it's just this architectural style. Now, in my opinion, if you were to put the house on the market, you would get some buyer resistance, but then you'd also get that person that says, I want the house because of the way it looks. So it just depends, you know. Homes have personalities and they appeal to specific people and don't appeal to others. So that's what we're looking at. We want to look at what is standard for the neighborhood. So now we're going to get into the economic portion, which we were talking about. Economic obsolescence is a loss in value from factors outside the property line. Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with the lot or the house. It has to do with as soon as you get away from that lot. And so factors, since it's a loss in value, it can be curable or incurable, but for the most part, it's incurable because there's not a whole lot you as a homeowner can do about it. I mean, if it's really bad, you might get the neighborhood against it. It could change, but at that point in time, it is considered incurable. Give me some examples. What do you think economic obsolescence would be?
I got a big one I'm dealing with now in
Yeah.
our Dallas neighborhood, the dark silver line that's going right through Prestonwood.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
I mean, streets were great streets.
uh-huh,
And if you're
but,
back into that silver line,
yeah,
or if you're across the street, completely different values.
because of that.
On the same street.
Right, right. I sold a house over in Garland and it was, I can't remember the name of the street, but all the houses were nice over here. But it was a big boulevard, but right across here were retirement homes and I guess you would call them assisted living homes and that sort of thing.
Section eight.
Yeah, and so it really made a difference because the house was facing it. And you had, you know, the drive was in the back. It really helped us buy the house because we could negotiate a little bit because the view across the street was more commercial in some respects. And we didn't know what the land was going to then be developed. It was already zoned commercial. So it could have a negative effect on that marketability of the house. So yeah, that's definitely it.
Those houses by HEB, where HEB is being built right there at Spring Creek and Preston.
Okay,
I don't know if that would affect their value or not, but they're really nice homes.
and they're backing right to this.
Well,
Let's-
it's a half a mile, something like that. but
Oh, okay.
Traffic.
The traffic. So traffic is an issue, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, uh-huh. What do you think about corner lots? Yes, no,
That
maybe.
could be an issue.
It could, depends on how busy the street is. A lot of people prefer corner lots because they get more land. Mhm. I have a situation in my neighborhood. I live in the shores out in Rockwall. And so as you go down Lakeside, whatever it is, there was this big piece of land and it was owned by one of our senators in Texas who passed away. I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, it was a big plot of acreage here and a beautiful house up on the hill. They call it Sunset Hill. It's really beautiful because you can see the sun setting and it's gorgeous. So anyway, it's up on this hill. Well, it goes under a special use. And, you know, and I was always so curious, what is the special use? Because I live way down over here, so it doesn't bother me at all. But all these homes are there and these
I would
homes,
sign that out, like.
well, we didn't put a sign up.
Oh.
There was a big
I mean,
yellow
you
sign.
can't-
Yeah.
You can't go to the city planning commission or whatever.
Well, it's too late by the time that comes up because it's already been done. I see this SU and I go, what is that? Anyway, so I had no idea. Come to find out, they started construction on it and it is a church. It's an Anglican church. And my guess is he left it to the church.
And
And it's a spinoff of St. Timothy's down here. And it's over here in Rockwall. And the church is right now in the house. In this land, they've got the driveways, all these people, it's in their backyard. I went like, holy smokes. Did something?
I'm sorry, would power lines be considered?
Absolutely. This was funny. So we went up to this house. I'm showing these people. Did you want to say something?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Are you sure?
Go ahead. List for you.
Oh, good. Okay, well, we'll talk about that. Let me finish the story. We'll talk about it. So we go into this house and it's so cute, you know, and it was so funny. I don't know. We all just ran into the house and we get inside and they liked it. We went to this house and I go, okay, look around a little bit. I walk out the front door. Don't ask me how I didn't see this. You know, those great big silver things that go up? I call them electric tree farms. But anyway, right out the front door, how I didn't see it going in, but we were so focused on the house itself. It was like over to the side, but when you opened the front door from the inside of the house, it was right in your eye, you know, path. And so he came over and I said, so, went to look at the street and everything, he goes, ooh, you know, and I said, because, you know, those lines, some people don't want them and some people don't care. All right, so I don't want to say anything negative about it. I just want you to be aware that the power line is out here. That's all I said, you know, and so it's the deal because they weren't gonna live with that, but it did sell eventually. I mean, it's a cute house. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I had a list, and this is kind of piggybacking on Larry's stuff. Room, but kind of what we're talking about now. How, say if you have a house that, backs to the power lines, is a larger lot than other ones. Backs to a creek, a golf course, a high line, backs to a, busy road, backs up to a shopping center. How do you do the plus and minus on that?
Okay, is this all the same house?
What to add or.
What to add or subtract, yeah. Okay, so you're gonna take a look. What you want to do is try and find comparable sales that back power lines, okay? And use those as a kind of, okay, this house sold it back to a power line, but the neighbor's house sold it. Was there a difference? Or did you see any buyer resistance in the sale? You see, so there's no real dollar amount because as I said, some people it bothers and some people it doesn't. It bothers me as a personal, you know, bother, but that's just me. If the people will say it's right down from where I work and I need to be here and this is, you know, they're gonna take it. So the golf course, yeah, some people like it, some people don't. They don't want golf balls in there coming through their windows.
So
Personally-
it doesn't change the value, it just changes the percentage.
No, it,
of
well,
People that.
it
buy.
can change the value. It's like a pool. It's like a golf course. It's like a railroad track. Okay, let me tell you the story. This is really true. Okay. This summer, actually it was April or May, we were looking at houses for this couple. And we go to this house. They really kind of wanted something either in like $1 million, $1.5 million that was done, or something that was around 6 or 7 that they could do into that, okay? And their thought was, you know, and then eventually, if they got the lower house, they'd fix it up, they'd sell that, they would rent that, and then they would move on. So that was their story. So we go to this house, it was in Forest Hills, and it was a part of Forest Hills, big Forest Hills, but the part where it's right on Lakeland, right there, and the railroad track. Okay, so all these homes were, you know, built right in front of the railroad tracks. So we pull up to the house and walked in and said, it was adorable. I mean, everything was pristine in there. You walked into this thing and I mean, it was, you wanted to just sit down and stay, just bring a suitcase, you know, out back, all windows, the swimming pool, the pool house, the whole, you know, covered area. Everything was just perfect about the house. They had a little baby, 3 months old. And so they came in and we're talking about it. I said, you know, well, the railroad track is back there. There's a fence there. And the railroad track was there. So he said, but you know, you really can't see it. And the garage was here and everything was corded off from that. So it wasn't like it was an eyesore. He said, well, maybe, you know, maybe we could consider this because it was in the 6s. And he goes, well, we'll think about, you know, we'll think about it. I think maybe this could work for us. And then we'll just live here for a while and then we'll sell it, you know, and I said, okay, so we leave the house and go to get in my car and he and his wife and the baby get in that car. And I'm just about to, you know, I had my window down, just about to pull out. sudden, this train comes through, oh no. It's, wait a minute, it gets worse, belching black smoke all over the place, it stink up the place for at least 30 minutes, and it literally shook the ground. I ran out of the car. I'm over there. I'm doubled over laughing. I go, the baby will never sleep through this. I mean, there was nothing else. We were just dying laughing, going, well, I guess that settles that. So that night, I, in bed, and I was banging on my phone, and I look at it, it's agent. Hey, can you give me some feedback on the house? And what did you think about it? So I wrote her back and I said, the house was absolutely adorable. They loved it, but the train was a deal breaker. And she writes back, she goes, oh, well, they put in a no nuisance sound law in there. And I go, well, I wrote her back. I said, it didn't work at 5:30 this afternoon. She goes, well, they'll take an offer. Bless her heart. It was for sale for the longest time. I think it either took off or I'm not sure if it's still for sale because it was like last spring, April, May. But it was so funny. So I think railroad tracks are a big deterrent. And so what you were saying there about the dart coming through, or who is it? You were dart. It really does make a difference. And we've got to figure out how much of a difference that really makes. Okay, so I was working with a buyer. We were down at Bishop Arts and he was single. And so he didn't need a whole lot of space, but he wanted something new and contemporary. And we found this house and it was just a little bit outside of Kessler, excuse me. And so it was really a perfect area for him. But it bothered me. The inside was great. He loved it. And we made an offer on it. And this was another lesson I learned. This agent called me, said they at 11 in the morning, said they accepted our offer and I sent it over and she waited. She got a better offer at 5 and she never got my offer. And I was so upset and mad and I had to call my buyer and say, I don't even know what to say. I thought I lost him, but I ended up not losing him and we sold a gorgeous house elsewhere. But what happened is this house, the reason I wasn't real high on it, it was right next to an automotive repair shop. Well, he's a guy, he didn't care. And then right across the street, there was a bar. And so I had been talking to the owner of the house before my client got there and he said, yeah, I go there every night, have a few beers, So it was kind of a guy thing. See, you were in Bishop Art, so it didn't matter. They love that stuff because they love being able to walk around all the commercial stuff. It's a very congenial type of, neighborhood. And even though as you went down the street, it got a little more residential, but we got a great house just a little farther southwest of that and it worked out all good.
So on Spring Creek, the houses that are sitting on Spring Creek, they have the little inlet where they can park in front of.
Yeah.
Would that be one of these?
I don't think so, because if we stayed in the neighborhood and tried to yes, it's gonna, if you were a block off of Spring Creek and had the same house, there's probably a bit of a difference. Maybe yes, maybe no. You're gonna have to kind of look and see. Now, this is when I would go further back into sales. I'd go a year or two back and see what was going on then. Was there any difference in the sales of the homes then against each other, this paired sales analysis I'm talking about. So I would go back a whole year and say, okay, this house sold on this street and it was on Spring Creek and this house sold over here. Was there a noticeable difference in the sales price? Who cares if it was a year ago? We're still going to get buyer resistance and see that. Yeah, no.
I was just thinking how it's gonna change from what's back to a buyer. I mean, you could have sold the house and sat on top of the earthquake, so
Yeah.
no one would care.
And I feel badly about that because I sold some houses, and to this person that we finally sold a house to, this house was listed, and I'm not going to get into this as we go, but it was listed for $899. We came in at $1.1 million and I got it appraised. So, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little, at the end of this class, how to get that done. And but I feel a little bad, although it's strong, it's not going to go anywhere. But I feel like for $1 million, now for $1.1 million, he could have got a better house. But that's not for me to say, so.
Question, I know we've talked about depreciation. Are you gonna talk about appreciation?
Only in the aspect that we're gonna talk about it as to what we think's going on right now, okay? It's really hard to measure appreciation because it hasn't happened yet.
So
And historically, an appraisal is based on history and current.
let me build on that then, because
Okay.
you had told me when we were doing our analysis, improvements that the homeowner had made over a period of time. You know, they just invested $100,000 in updates.
Yeah.
And you give me a specific term of how to refer to that. Just talk a little bit about that.
Well, basically, it was done during a time, and this is what I kind of implied when we were in physical obsolescence, is that the house had been improved over time, or at least all at once, but should have been over time. You see what I'm saying? So the amount of money putting in still covered the market value of that home, that its marketability was not affected negatively because of that. But we do want to give it some credence here because it really brought the home up to date versus one that was not brought up to date like that. Example, I went on a listing and they wanted 580 for their house. And I was showing them, this was that neighborhood I was talking about north of Northwest Highway. And I was showing them that the ones for 530, for 580. Hey, by the way, if you're leaving, they are recording this, so you can catch the end when we talk about how to challenge the appraisal.
Perfect.
All right, so what happened is that they go ahead and what was I saying? Anybody remember? Oh, goodness, yeah.
Talking about appreciation.
Yeah, but
580 versus 530.
what? Oh, yeah, okay, I got it. It's coming down. Okay, so they wanted it at 580 and I was looking at sales in there that were the same size or larger, maybe by 100 square feet, that really had been brought up to today's standards. They did do some improvements. It looked nice, but it didn't have that flash, you know, where the wall was torn out, you know, very contemporary. They still had those walls. And I said, look, I think that you could probably get in the low fives for this. If we listed it this other house has been sitting there and now they've reduced it twice. We don't want to do that. Well, they don't want to do it. And I'm sorry, but I'm not going to take any listing. Not that I'm so great, but I got to tell you, I spend a lot of money on my listings by the time I advertise, signage and you know, do what we need to do to show it. Just like I just lost my listing out in Las Colinas for, he withdrew. I spent almost $2,000 on marketing that house because of what we did. I showed 5 open houses. We can't get anybody to look at it. And there's 6 houses in there for sale. Nobody's looking at them either. It was a fruitless effort at this point. I don't blame him. You know, we listed at the wrong time. We listed July 1st. July 1st, everything hit the fan. I mean, it just stopped. Buyers just stood back and said, I'm waiting. So, you know, but getting back to your question about appreciation, again, appreciation is something that we look at in the future and can't measure. And that's why it's not really used, except for the fact in the top line of the grid, you're going to see there's room for when all these people were overbidding, the appraisers were starting to add a percentage on top of the sales price. Like, you know, you can look at the sales and know it's between, 2% and 20% over asking. So they would look at that and say, okay, average, people are going 10% over, 8% over, we'll do that. And so they were putting a positive spin on that and upping the price.
How do I know that? Does the listing agent tell them we got?
No, it's all market, it's all in MLS. I mean, all that statistic. Oh, no,
What the price.
As it's sold.
Over list.
see, yeah. Yeah, and I'm gonna talk about that because I have a letter here that I want to read to you that basically I wrote to the appraiser when we did this house, we were at $899 and we came in at one, these are the reasons that this is the information that we based our offer. And then I explained all that and I gave exact. So to see, we had 4 pendings in there and one had sold twice. And a period of 6 weeks and just kept, the price just kept going up from 1.4 to 1.6. It started at 1.2 and they sold the first one at 1.4 and resold it again within 6 weeks because they decided they wanted to buy another house instead of that one and sold it for 1.6, but it just hadn't closed yet. And so we had the documentation, it was going to closing, so it was very close. So that it all works out.
Is, as far as the appreciation goes, is the like making the house younger, is that kind of
Updating.
as how they
Updating the house.
appreciate it?
Well, that's how the market reacts to it. See, it's not anything that the seller is doing or that the buyer is doing, but in a way, it's the buyer that was leading the market at that time. And you're asking me, I don't know. I mean, we were at the point where I didn't even know what to tell people to offer. Did you? I mean, you walk into this and say, well, how bad do you want it? How much money do you have? Because if you want it, we probably could make it happen. And then I call the agent and then I'm talking to them saying, how many offers do you have? Okay, I know you can't tell me what it is, but if we come in at this, are we in the game? So those are the kind of things that we were dealing on. I'm kind of glad it's over in some respects. I mean, it's still out there, but it's not as crazy as it was because and again, the value is going to stick because people are already invested in it. Too many people are already invested. It's not like somebody did it one time. That's why I feel okay about my buyer buying that for 1.1. I know the neighborhood, it's not going to go down. It's right near the Arboretum. It's right near White Rock Lake. It's got good reasons in a C Street, which is like the M Streets, so it's going to hold its value. So we want to look at that and know that neighborhood. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but it's honestly so important to understand this stuff before we move on, to the other, because I think how do you feel about a neighborhood, all these new houses are being built and people are parking in the street. Jeez. And then it's just cops. I mean, you go down and they're on both sides of the street and these houses are brand new and they're going in the fours.
HOAs impact that at all?
The streets are public, you see, and so they can't. It has to do with the city. The city doesn't give a rip. And so I'm talking specifically, there's some houses over there off Firewheel, not quite that far. It's actually in Saxe. So off of George Bush there, and you just go in, there's all these brand new houses are everywhere. Is that economic obsolescence? I say no, because everybody's doing it in the neighborhood.
Some of those streets, a fire truck couldn't get down.
I know. Go down, I don't know if you guys go to Dallas much, but Southwestern, beautiful homes on Southwestern and University Park. You can't even get down the street between the workers on one side and the cars on the other, and then you got 2 cars. It's only a 3-car spread. So you got 2 here and it's you. So anybody coming with you, somebody's got to sit back. And it's a mess. And it's like that. It doesn't matter what day you go. It's like Chick-fil-A. If there's cars there, it doesn't matter.
Collins found a unique way to fix that problem. They've just limited parking on one side of the street, so you can only park on one side.
That's not a bad idea. See, here's the problem, and especially with your house, with the 3-story house and 6 people driving cars in that house, where are they going to park their cars?
Must be living in.
They do. It's because of the families. They're, the extended
generations.
It's the generations, and that's exactly what happened in our neighborhood, because when I was telling you about St. Louis, in Atlanta, it was basically the mom, the family was living upstairs, the mom was living on the middle floor. That's what her bedrooms were, and then, it's.
That's 4 kids, they become
Yeah,
teenagers.
and they're all teenagers and they have cars, exactly.
Well, that's my next door neighbors. They own a business, so they had the company trucks to.
Yeah,
They
now
have 2
sometimes
adult-
your HOAs will say no companies.
We don't have HOA.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they have 2 adult, either
Kids.
teens or adult kids. So mom, dad, 2 kids, there's 4 vehicles, and then the company trucks are 6.
I know.
And every time I pull in my neighborhood.
It's just, it makes you mad, and there's just not a whole lot to do about it, and, because And that's what's happening with all this congested living. That's why, you know, people for a while are going to the outlying areas. I'm telling you, Fate's on fire right now, Royce City, because they can get to a highway and that can get them to town.
I have a similar situation in my neighborhood. The guy's a landscaper. He's got, 3 big trucks, working trucks.
Yeah.
And sometimes they park them like parallel to each other, so
You can't,
getting through is hard to get through. So one of our neighbors had a good idea, is that, there are citations that they can get, because if for an emergency, a fire truck or an ambulance cannot get through,
Yeah.
okay, they're gonna cite you for that.
Yeah.
So we take a picture of it, send it over to the city of Plano, and they did give us a citation for that.
good. Well, listen to this. We've got a guy on lakes, on shores that when he brings his boat in, okay, so his garage is a side entry garage and the front of it sides to the shores boulevard. And so he'll pull it out and his trailer is out in the street and he puts an orange cone there. And it's
nice.
right on the curb. And I go like, I just hope somebody really just slams it. I'm sorry, I'm not that nice. I don't want to do it, but I hope somebody does. You just get to that. So anyway, I kind of want to move on just a little bit. I could go on all day. I love to talk about real estate and I love to talk about what's, all the things that we can pull this, but I think we can actually go to the form now, and I'm going to kind of blow through that. I'm going to be a long time.
So it's the.
Yeah, I got to hustle because we're 11:30. So I did want you to see this last page under terms. You can read this on your own. This is some area in here that will give you some information as to the percentages that the appraiser needs to stay within the grid when we get to that second page. But I'm going to say here. So this will be able to explain a little bit about that. One thing I wanted to ask you guys about, how do you feel about solar panels?
Solar panel?
Don't want them. I mean, and as far as value, I don't like them either, but as far as it's value, contributory value, yes, no?
No value, right?
Hmm?
No value.
I personally don't think so. To be honest with you, the appraisers are still, the jury's still out on it because they don't have enough data. And from what I'm reading, these are the reasons why I don't think it's such a benefit. First of all, it's a lot of money to put in. It's going to take you a long time to recover that money back in savings. Okay. Then you've got the lease or the purchase that has to be handled at the sale. So if it's leased, you either need to assume it or it needs to be paid off or it could be the sale. So those kind of things. But I read something a couple of weeks ago that really made a difference to me. From what this article said, and I don't know how true it is, but it was an article, and it said that every degree over 77 degrees, that the solar panels lose 35% of its effectability. Wow. If it gets to 104, it stops working at all because it's too hot. Then you've got cloudy days. Okay, if you're up north, you've got snow in the winter, you've got clouds, a lot of clouds. You're not going to get a lot of solar energy going in there. Dirt will cover down here. We've got a lot of blowing dirt, I'm sneezing like crazy because of it. And it gathers moss on it. So you've got to keep them clean. So there's so many reasons, in my opinion, not to put a whole lot of value in solar. But that's just an opinion. The way that appraiser is going to prove it is to find homes that have solar panels that are sold against homes in the same neighborhood that don't have them. Is there a difference in price? You see, so that's how it's measured. That gives you a little bit of an idea there. Okay, so I just kind of wanted your opinion there. So what I did is this is a copy of an appraisal that is just off the internet. So I don't know if these people have really not, it doesn't really matter. But here's what I wanted to talk to you about. When you get your appraisal report, I'm going to show you how to read this appraisal. So this is the front page of the URA. And it's called the 1040. Now look along here and see these black lines going down here. All right, this divides it up. So if you see the first little section is for the subject property. That's just giving you detail about what the subject is. The appraiser's telling you what it is, and actually what are you looking for? What kind of appraisal are you looking for? We're looking for basically highest and best use. Underneath it, you got a space for the contract. We used to fill that out a lot. I don't think that it needs to be filled out today on the appraisal. It may or may not be. Used to make a big difference as to what kind of a what kind of a loan they were making. So it's possible that they just left that blank, but probably in a real appraisal, you would have some information there. Here's where we start getting important. See this next section where it says neighborhood? This is where the economic obsolescence can come in. This is going to tell you, okay, what type of the neighborhood is it? Suburban? How much is it built up? Is it stable, declining? Is it slow? What are the property values and where do they fall? This is important. What's the ratio of single family versus multifamily versus commercial? Tells you that. Present land use, what is that? He's got it divided out according to percentages. And then he talks about where the property is located. Property is located just north of Northwest Highway and east of blah, blah, in some school district. This is where you're going to find out a little bit more information because you have to remember people reading this know nothing about Dallas. So they have to get a picture in their head as to where this property is and how and what happens. He says here, marketing time for this neighborhood is under 3 months and talks a little bit about it. Most of this is canned statements, but it still has to be accurate for the area that you're in. So this is where your economic obsolescence might come in. You would say, actually, I go down one into site. He's describing the site. This property backs to a railroad track. This property had, let's mention what is good and what's bad. This property is situated on a golf course. This property is close to schools and shopping. This is where you're going to find out all of those things that you're looking at. Why is this important to you as agents? See, you're not only, if you're listing the property, you're not only representing the seller, but if you have a buyer, you have to have the same kind of knowledge. You want to know when you take your buyer into that house that you're going to know all this stuff that's going on. That's your job. And if you miss that, just like you didn't know that there was a zoning across the street that was going to affect the future value of this, you didn't know that there was a road going in, you're going to be held responsible for it. They're going to be mad at you down the road. You need to know these things. And this is where the appraiser goes deeper into it and understands that. Now, I realize that we're showing houses and we're showing a whole bunch of them, and I wouldn't do it on all of them, but what I would do is when we started to narrow down to the one that my buyer is going to make an offer on, I'm going to really look hard at that property for them. Because even if they like it, it's our duty to know everything good, bad, and ugly about that house that we can learn. So
What does the 1004 MC data mean?
that's the 1004. It means that this is the URAR, the Universal Residential Appraisal Report. It is the 1040. You know how like we have the 37-9 or something. It just documents what form it's being used. So it's the type of the form. Okay, so then going down, so the site value is going to go ahead and somehow be effective with that economic obsolescence we were talking about. This is where you're going to find something like that. We move on down to the next section, and this is the improvement section. This is going to be your physical obsolescence, and even your functional obsolescence will fall into this, because this is where we talk about what is actually in the house, and it's the house itself, whereas above it, it's the lot itself and its exposure to the market. And then your improvements, for example, when they were talking about the improvement for the addition, all that would go down here. Your swimming pool would go down here. Your basically outside improvements that you would have covered patios, built-in fireplace in the backyard, fencing, all that goes down here. And then it talks, are there any physical deficiencies or adverse conditions that affect the livability, soundness, and integrity of the property? Now here, it kind of crosses the line a little bit. I would definitely stick at this point to the house itself, but the next sentence, does the property generally conform to the neighborhood in functional utilities, style, condition, and use of construction? So you want to look for differences there. This is not a bad guideline, girls and boys, for you to keep and make like a list when you're going into a house and say, let me use some of this stuff. How built up is this neighborhood? What factors, affect the lot itself? Where are we in town? What are the schools like? So this pretty much reads everything that you need to know as a buyer's agent or a listing agent to be concerned about. Make sense? So this is why when it spends so much time into the physical and to the, to the depreciation part. Because again, we can talk about appreciation, and I do want to talk about it a little bit before we go today. But the thing is, it can't measure appreciation until it happens. Okay, and so all we can do is go on historical fact. So knowing as a buyer's agent what to tell your buyer to offer. I really don't. All I can say is, I just know that, look at what I do is I print a CMA and a quick CMA, and I show them the percentages down here, and I say, these are the sales in the subject's neighborhood, and this is the percentage over asking price that we are at. Where do you feel comfortable? So, make sense? Anybody? Okay, so let's just flip over here. I'm not going to ask you, like I said, I'm not teaching you how to do an appraisal today, but I do want you to recognize what we're looking at. Okay. So it used to be the cost approach used to be here, and everybody used to do the cost approach, whether the house was new or 100 years old. That's kind of silly at this point, because unless it's new, we can get pretty accurate on it, whether Marshall and Swift cost manual. But other than that, if it's not new, we know what the new houses are all selling for because we can see them on MLS and measure them. So a lot of appraisers don't even use the cost approach anymore. And then there's the income approach that let's tell the income approach down at the bottom, which if we're not seeing a whole lot of rentals in the neighborhood, we're probably not even going to address the income approach. So we are looking at the market approach, and that is this grid right here. So again, 3 approaches to value: cost, market, income. So we're looking at market, and that's where the grid is. All right. So that's what we're mostly concerned with as agents, is the marketing. So when we look at this, everything is compared. The subject is compared to the comparables. So the subject is either better than or less than or comparable. If I say it that way, I know that if my subject is better than, if it's got more square footage, then it's a positive for me. If it's less than, it's a negative for me. So we're going to add these positive and negatives up. We're going to talk about the appraisal is going to address the issues of financing, the time on the market, the location. That's a big one. Generally it's all pretty simple. The site, the view, the design, the quality of construction, the actual age, and then the condition. The condition is going to then reference its effective age. It doesn't say so here, but that's why I wanted to talk about it. So when you get down, you finally saw it's right above where the room count is. So you see an actual age, a C1. Is that a C1? What is that? It should be a Q1. I don't know what it is, but anyway. Oh, it's 61 years, excuse me. Quality of construction is the quality, and then down there, the condition. The actual age is 61 years, but the condition is a C3, which means probably 50% of that. You know what I'm saying? It's right in the middle. It's 1 to 6. I believe is the code that they're using these days. And the quality of construction falls right in the middle too at a number 3. So these are the things that we talked about under physical depreciation. When we get to the room count and the size, this is where we talked about the functionality of the house, the functional obsolescence. If you look below that, that's where your additions go. See your basement, finished rooms below grade. Actually, you can put it there, like if you have a room addition, that will work as well in that space there. You'll find that them putting it there. They could also put it down in those blank spaces down here and type something in. And then, of course, heating, cooling, garage count, porch, patio, deck, pool, and spa. So when you see these adjustments on the grid line here, and this is that last piece of paper I told you to read about, this is where the appraiser has to fall within the lines of that percentage. So there is a 10% line adjustment. There is a 15% net adjustments, and there's a 25% gross adjustment, which means, and a gross adjustment, you add them all up as if they didn't have a plus or a minus sign. So that's your gross. Your net is you take the minus away from the positive, and that gives you your net adjustments. And your line adjustments just need to be 10% or less of the sales price of the comparable sale. So again, you don't need to worry about all that, especially what you do want to check is make sure the same amount, divide the square footage number, the adjustment against the dollar per square foot, and it should be, you can round it, you know, it doesn't have to be exact, but if it's 35, it should be somewhere around 35. It shouldn't be way off base there. So you want to read this part.
I was gonna ask you, on the square footage adjustment, I noticed that in some comparable one, they have a $50,000,
Mhm,
no, 6,500.
mhm. Because it was 13.
But the price per square foot is 423. So what?
Yeah, that doesn't, and this is why, as an agent, I don't look at, the last thing I personally look at, because of my appraisal background, is the dollar per square foot. Because it doesn't tell me a whole lot. When you really come down to it, it could include a pool, it could include a barn, you know, all that, it could include 6 acres. So I don't know that. And so if I just was scanning dollar per square foot, that doesn't tell me anything. I've got to look at similar properties that are similar size, similar age, similar amenities, and then I can look at dollar per square foot because that's going to help me a little bit. But I see agents typically zero right in for that. I don't know. I think they taught it that way at some point in time. You need to look beyond that. Okay, dollar per square foot can kind of, I look at it. But, you know, I get buyers going, $350 a square foot. I go, yeah, but that had a pool and a barn, you know, it was sitting on 6 acres. You know, it doesn't mean anything sometimes. So you want to look deeper than that. All right. And like I said, too, could be an over improvement. And then all of a sudden the dollar per square foot's really low because they overbuilt this house, or it could be an under improvement. And the dollar per square foot's really high because it's a tiny house. But it doesn't fit in the neighborhood. You know, if you're in a neighborhood, you can see a little tiny house built in the middle of all these mansions, which it happens. You know, it's an under improvement. Why? Because it's not contributing the amount to the land that the land deserves. So that land can bring more value to the market if something else besides a tiny house was on it. So that's what we're getting at here. So that kind of sums up this. Now, I do want to mention this because I've had agents tell me, if you please look down at the very last section where it says reconciliation. That's where you're going to find the value of the appraisal. It's hard to find. It's like they vary it, okay? So it's down here, and he did do a cost approach. He said indicated value by the comparison or market approach is 520, cost approach is 524. And then he reconciles it and saying the sales approach gives the greatest amount of reflected has been considered because it reflects the market most properly. So he says something like that. Income approach was not used because it was not necessary. The appraisal is made as is. This is important. If it's under construction at this point and they're doing an appraisal before it's finished, it has to be done as subject to. And then the appraiser has to go back out and reappraise it after it's ready to close and it gets a CO. So that's what that little thing is for there. The rest of it, there you'll see some, you can read through this and take a look. Your cost approach is on page 5. And then you go through it. The rest is just a bunch of fill for the appraisal, you know, the appraiser, basically protecting himself, you know, and everything he says, licensing is there. And he puts in a survey, photos and all of that. So like I say, feel free to go ahead and look at this and kind of learn from it. But here's the crux of the matter, and here's why I'm glad y'all are here today. So I want to tell you a story about this house. This is the one that we paid 1.1, okay? And so what I had learned to do, and I was the buyer's agent on this, I put this together. I called the listing agent. I said, I know you have sales, put it wherever you have, let me know. I'll put a packet together for the appraiser. I tell them, I'm lucky because I can tell them I'm an appraiser for 21 years, so they kind of trust me a little bit. But, you know, basically, Paul did this and he's not an appraiser and it worked good, right? And so, yes.
So the appraiser said that was the best package he'd ever received.
Okay, so what did I do here? What I do is I go into the MLS and I go down to where it says CMA, not cloud CMA, but CMA. And I go ahead and pick out all my comps and I throw it in there, what I'm gonna use. And make sure they're the ones that, you know, you want to use. And then pull out page, the first page, because we're not going to present this to anybody, and pull out the page that says the recommended price is. We never want to tell the appraiser what the recommended price is. That's not our business.
Comparative market analysis.
No, I basically, there's a page on the CMA when you print it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just that front page there. So what I did then is I've taken my subject here and I kind of put it in, you can use any kind of a file that you want. Sometimes I can't use this one because it's too thick. And so, but in this particular file is not what I'm talking about here, but this is another property, but I wanted you to see it. I put it in because this one, I had all the photos in. But this is the property, and I went ahead and this is out of CMA here, out of interest. And then I go to the taxes, I put the taxes in. I put every photo in. So I'm gonna tell you why in a minute. Then I put the report in. Now, this is the short report. What I did tell Paul to do is put the long report in, just like the subject would be, the MLS agent long. You got to use agent long because it gives you all of the property details in it. Then you put the taxes in behind that and all the photos for that particular property. You do that for however many you have. In this case, I only used sales, but sometimes I had, in this case, with this letter, I used pending sales and I put a note in as well. And then at the end, you know, I put the map in designating all of the location. The maps in the back here. And this one I used some grids, but because this house was $1.6 million. But basically, I'm going to put the map in, I'm going to put the analysis, and you can pick and choose your CMA report. You can pick and choose what you want in there. I kind of print the whole thing and then just throw out the papers I don't want, okay? And put in what I think is valuable. But here's the important thing. You want to put everything in about the subject, including right on down to the pictures in the map. You want to put everything in about each sale or pending sale that you use. And if you use listings, you want to do that too. Because you've just done the appraisal for the appraiser, if you do that, they have to look at the same things that we're showing right here, and you just cut their workload by hours because you've just done their work for them. You pulled it right out of MLS for them. This is the reason. So I do, and then what I do is an open letter to the appraiser and I stick it in there and I give it to the listing agent. Or if I'm the listing agent, I call them, you know, I let the lender know that I'm leaving a packet for the appraiser and that they are to take it. So here's what I said. Open letter to the appraiser. This was the one for the 1.1 million that was listed for $899. I wanted to leave this packet for you to give some insight as to how we arrived at an offer for this property. As we are all aware, and this market is changing daily and keeping up is challenging to say the least. I have compiled all the recent sales, pending and active options that were available on MLS for your consideration. We limited our search to 75214 zip code in general and the Lakewood Elementary in particular. Motivating factor for us was the shortage of inventory as well as the short days on market of the comparables, which are showing a marketing time of 2 to 36 days and a percentage range of overlist price of 105 to 125%. The following information is gathered from listing agents on some of the closed and pending sales you might find relevant. So you always want to be suggesting, you don't want to be telling. So then I listed the sales that, for example, this one, 7010 Lindsay Casaloma is far superior location. The C streets are more appealing than Hollywood Heights in general, but also Lindsay is busier and Tennyson is not a great corner lot. So I just gave some opinions of, you know, some detail that I gathered from the MLS and from the agents. And for example, this one, this was Bobolink. This just sold 6 weeks ago for 1.4. It is now under contract again. The owners never moved in. And they got 1.65 this time around, only 2,400 square feet, both listing included in this packet. So I showed the original listing and sale, and then I showed the pending one. So by the time I put all this together, and I said, I would also like to mention the following information regarding the property. And I talk about the property and the full kitchen remodel, the half bath remodel, all of the upgrades in the property is right here. So that cuts it down. Now, if you didn't want to do a letter, you can, I would put it in here too. Subject properties upgrades, you know, if you got a list, stick that in this report as well. And then I hate to say this, having been a real estate appraiser for 21 years, I know gathering this information can be time consuming. So I provided the full MLS agent information, tax and photos for your convenience. Thank you in advance for your hard work in estimating this value of the kindest regards. So you can use this exact sentence, you just don't put in having been a real estate appraiser. There's nothing wrong with saying any of that. Yeah, I know you could say it, but then I would be in trouble. So, yeah. So basically, this was unbelievable. I want to tell you this one last story, and this is to show you about location. So there was a property, I was representing the sellers, and they found this property. We've been looking. And luckily I had done some business and some sales over in the Bishop Arts Kessler area. So they found this house over in Southwest Dallas, over by Hampton, you know, so it was quite a ways away. It was over by 5 Mile Creek, and this house was listed for, I want to say $489, and we came in at $540. And nothing in that whole neighborhood had sold over 400,000 a year, nothing. But this house was done and designed by a particular architect. It was shown on home tours. It sat on an 1.5 acres of wooded lot. Every porch around it, there was porches all around it. Everything was a beautiful scene. 5 Mile Creek was right behind it. You could walk down the creek, you could walk to the park. And so we felt like this was just a unique property over and above anything else in there. The neighborhood was well maintained, but nothing had sold over 400,000. So how are we going to get there? So what I did, luckily, I had sold and showed those homes over in the other area that had been renovated to the state this had been renovated in, and showed the desirability of this area. If you were that buyer, where would you have to go to find a property that would be comparable? So you had to go to Kessler to find it because it wasn't hanging out, you know, in Southwest Dallas. So we wrote it up, and basically I showed those sales, which were way over, a lot smaller, did not have that, but attracted the same buyer. And I knew these buyers because that's what they want, is this historical. And this same couple was looking at those homes over there that sold, but they were up on a hill, they were inconvenient. It just really wasn't the right lot for them and their family. This was. So where do you have to go to get this? So I went out, then I also I collected land sales, and I showed them what that 1.5 acres was worth. So I put that in the packet as well. So here's your sales over here. Maybe you can make an adjustment for location if you want. Then I put in the land sales in subject's area, and we got it appraised right on the dot. So you see where the advantage of doing this is, and here's what I would. Yeah, so I basically did the appraisal again for him, put all that information in there, did not suggest the price. And so what happens is that what you need to be doing as agents, in my opinion, what I do is when I'm listing a house, I got to do it just like the appraiser would look at it. Okay, I'm going to look at everything I can and have those comps ready to go before we list. You know, and so hopefully it sells fast, so I don't have to do it twice. But anyway, the second thing, if you're showing a buyer, again, I know, you know, you're showing maybe 10, 12 houses before they zero in. I don't expect you to do all of this on each one, but you do want to do a good market analysis on the one you're looking at and say, is it worth anything? What's it worth? And when you walk in, you know, they know once they get interested in it, then you go back and you do this. And you have this ready at the time you write that contract, okay? If you do that, you've warded off that appraisal being failing. You basically have. Now, let's say it doesn't come up. At least you know where you stand, and you know what you have to go to the closing table with your buyer and seller. Say, look, this is not going to appraise. So who's got the money to cover this? What are we going to do? You know, buyer paying, seller paying, we both paying. What are we going to do? Because I'm not giving any more of my commission. Okay. So you really want to be able to say that. So that's kind of all of it in a nutshell, but I really think this is good. I did give you a copy of this just to kind of give you a format. Don't pay any attention to. But what I would do differently in this is when you get, and I'm going to try and redo this for future classes, but I would not. This is cool to look at and put in your own file and stuff, but I would do the full page here. I would do the full agent full here.
Maybe I can comment on what I learned out of this as well.
Mhm.
When you look at all these pictures on MLS, it's very hard until you go through it and you don't have that luxury of doing.
Exactly.
But I did walk him through this. I always prepare a list of improvements that have been made.
Yep.
But I walked him through the house
Mhm.
as to those improvements. This doorway was eliminated, this was reconfigured.
Yeah.
And it really helped him understand what had changed between the previous owner. And I also included the full from the last purchase in 2017 versus the one today, so he could see the picture evidence as well.
Right, excellent. Here's the problem with that is that sometimes the appraiser does not want to see you, nor do they want to walk through with you. So do the best you can in a picture analysis like this, okay? Because you were lucky that he did that. A lot of them don't. And so, or they won't even tell you when they're going out. So you
Well, he
basically,
needed me to let him in the door.
yeah, that's great.
And
That's
I asked him for his
Yeah,
permission.
yeah, is it okay? Yeah, and that's great, because I think the thing is, just like appraisers, they're touchy and they'll sue you if they may file complaints that this agent told me what to do, like nobody tells me what to do. You can't influence, is what I'm trying to say. All you can do is present. And let the black and white sell them. They can't deny this. So, and in most of the times, you're gonna make a good deal. You're not gonna let your people overpay if there's any chance of them getting hurt. You know what I'm saying? They can overpay if they have money, I don't care, but other than that. So that's it. We went the full 2 hours. I could talk for probably another 2, but that's okay. I think it's probably tired of me by now.
Definitely. Okay. So what about the effective date of like a new building on the first floor?
Yeah.
Being